Well, Buckeyes fans, it's time to turn the page and get ready for what's going to be the biggest matchup in college football on Saturday. The Ohio State Buckeyes and the Penn State Nittany Lions squaring off in Happy Valley. We preview Ohio State's offense versus the daunting Penn State defense on this episode of the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
And welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast. Anthony Moeglin here alongside my partner and former Ohio State Buckeye offensive tackle Kevin Woidke. And tonight we are getting you prepped for the Ohio State and Penn State game, looking specifically at the Ohio State offense versus the daunting Penn State defense. And Kevin, this matchup has everything that you want when you look at this, when you see the schedule come out and whatever it does in May or June, whenever it does early in the off season. But it's got everything that you could ever want. This is a top 5 matchup this week. And this field is going to be filled with NFL talent all over the place, and especially when Ohio State has the football. This Penn State defense has a lot of action on it, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But Kevin, you've experienced going over to Happy Valley, going over to Penn State as a Buckeye. What's it kind of like? You talked about it a little bit yesterday on our film episode podcast, which we encourage you to check out here on this YouTube channel. But you've lived it, you've done it, you've slept in the hotel before the game, you've heard the fans outside, you've eaten the ice cream. What's it all like going over to Happy Valley as an enemy?
I mean, it's definitely an interesting place. It's a hard place to play football when they're up, but when they're not, it's not so bad. I mean, that's kind of the only way to put it is I've only played in good games there, but I know from people I've talked to that if they get down early, they kind of fall out of it. And that's where I'm hoping we can jump on them quickly and get them out of it. I think the biggest benefit for Ohio State is that it's a big noon kickoff and not a night game because they get an extra jolt of energy, and they always play us at night because they try to make it a rivalry when we've got multiple other ones that we have to deal with before them. But that's just they're looking for one. They say the same thing against Michigan. They laugh at them too. So it's interesting when they've won, I don't know how many games in the last 15 years against us. I don't know what we're
not many
games, but
yeah. So Kevin, talk us through that a little bit. So being that it is a big noon kickoff, right? It's you're kicking off at noon. You wake up. There's not time in the morning, right? You get up. You have a team meeting probably early in the morning, and then you get on the bus, get over to the stadium. It all happens really quickly. But if it were a night game, are you sticking around in the hotel all day? Like, what does that feel like? Because you're right, man. Like you said, that hotel is right in the middle of town. Everyone knows that Ohio State or the opponent's staying at it, and you're there. Are you pretty much there all day?
Yeah, you're basically there until game. You usually get there about 3 hours before game time, so you're there until 4:15ish, maybe closer to 5. It's definitely interesting. I mean, you just kind of lounge around, watch stuff on your iPad, just kind of try to get your mind right. Don't want to get too high too quickly in terms of energy because you don't want to run out of it. But that's where it's like, and then you're also doing the balancing act of seeing how take a nap where you feel energized but not exhausted after. So it's definitely a song and a dance. But
yeah.
I mean, noon you're up at 7. Go right to walkthrough. You go right to walkthrough. Then you go to film. Then you go to breakfast /lunch, and then you go upstairs, get changed, get on the bus, and go over there.
Yeah, it happens really quickly, especially for those noon games. Get right to the stadium, get on the field, get the day going, which I agree with you. I think that's advantage for both teams, especially with this being, a top 5 matchup and one that's going to have the eyes of the nation on it. Everybody is going to be watching this game because of a lot of reasons, right? It's going to have a ton of national implications with if Ohio State, if Penn State is able to knock off the Buckeyes, like the Buckeyes are certainly on the outside looking in of the actual college football playoff, with 2 losses. You'd feel good about it with losses to the number 1 and number 3 teams in the country, but you still, now you're leaving it up to chance. And on the flip side, if Ohio State gets this victory, they can catapult themselves back into the, not only to win the Big Ten, but to be the number 1 team in the country. Depending on what happens kind of throughout the country on Saturday. So a huge opportunity on both sides of the football coming on Saturday, and one that also is important for both of these coaches. I think both of these coaches their seats are warm, I'd say. It's for Ohio State, it's kind of in this weird limbo where Ryan Day beats up on everybody and then kind of loses to Michigan at this point, or loses to big teams. And the same can be said for James Franklin. There's some kind of some jarring stats, some that I'm sure that Penn State fans don't love to hear. But since in his time at James Franklin's time at Penn State, he's 1-6 versus top 10 teams at home. He's 6-9 versus ranked teams at home, just in general. He's 1-8 versus top 5 teams, and most importantly for us, he's 1-9 versus Ohio State. Hard to believe James Franklin has been at Penn State for 10 years, but 1-9 against Ohio State. This stat comes from College Football Report at CFB Rep on Twitter. But Kevin, 1-9 against Ohio State. That's pretty shocking, man.
I think that I would have to check, but I think a lot of those ones came in one game, one singular, where it was the Penn State game where they blocked the field goal, returned it for a touchdown, and we almost still came down and won, but we came up short. And that was the only time beat Ohio State. It's the only time beat. It says 1-6 at home against top 10 teams, 1-4 against top 5 teams, or whatever. It's all that one game.
Yeah.
And I wasn't playing in it, so that's why I'm going to go ahead and say that's the reason.
You would have had that guy, right? You'd got his arms down.
It was actually the spot that I was in.
Was it?
But yeah, no. So it was. I just think, James Franklin has been. I think he's just used to it now. It's like a seat in a car that stays outside in December in Cleveland. It's always warm. So the heated seat has been on him for
a while,
for a long time.
Well, it's really interesting because we talk about Ryan Day's struggles, but Penn State seems to be, well, now that Michigan's kind of fallen off, and we'll get to them in a couple weeks, but Penn State's always been, we talked about it, the little brother to Ohio State. And that's just the right way to say it, because they just cannot, they'll beat everybody else in the conference. They'll win nice games, and we'll get into their schedule here. They're vulnerable, man. Everyone's kind of leaning towards Penn State getting a win here. They know that. Ryan Day, from all reports today out of Columbus, was like very on edge today because he's starting to hear everything, and everybody inside the Woody is hearing it too. Like, hey, Ohio State is on upset alert. But like, this Penn State team isn't a bunch of world beaters, and we'll get into them from a personnel perspective. But they certainly believe that this is their best opportunity, and they're going to come in and play like that. And sometimes it's really challenging when when you're coming in and you're not the underdog, I guess I would say, or I guess when you have the expectation to get a win. That can be really challenging for them because it does feel like Ohio State's got a little bit of that underdog feel heading into this one.
Yeah, I think that hopefully lights a fire under Ohio State. But, who knows? I don't think we were ever an underdog walking into Penn State. The only year that we were ranked lower was the year that we came back in Columbus with Saquon, who returned the opening kickoff.
Were you on that team?
I was, yeah. So I was on both the comebacks, which was fun. But it was, it's a weird feeling for Ohio State to be underdog in anything, let alone against Penn State. So it'll be interesting to see how they choose to use it to motivate, or if they use it as a distraction.
Yeah, and one of the big reasons that, and they are, or they're not actually, Ohio State is 3.5-point favorites currently as it stands right now, which is shocking. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about him. I'm talking about him like, yeah, everything I'm hearing is people saying, oh, this is Penn State. This is all Penn State. We feel like they're going to get beat. We talked about it. Like Ohio State's certainly vulnerable, but they're still getting the nod from Vegas. So yeah, if you're on that, now would be a good time to jump on that, whatever side you want to be on there. But Kevin, part of the reason why Ohio State does feel that they are, going to be fighting an uphill battle on Saturday is because of the issues at O-line. Obviously, Josh Simmons goes out 2 weeks ago with the season-ending injury, and then Zen Mikulski goes out on Saturday against Nebraska, and his was leave on a cart. Nothing definitive yet. Coach Day talked about it today in his press conference and basically just said, we're going to continue to evaluate him. You and I were laughing before we started recording here. Like college, they don't have to say anything if they don't want to about their injuries. NFL, like you have to report it. It's damn near a HIPAA violation because everything that's wrong with every injured guy. But in college, he's basically like, hey, he may play, he may not, and that's part of the chess match you're going to see. So, Kevin, let's go 2 hypotheticals here, right? Let's say hypothetical 1, he's injured, right? He can't go. What, in your opinion, you're on the offensive line coach, you're in the room this week. What are you trying to do to mix some things up, to move some pieces around, to put a line out there that's going to give you the best chance to win?
Yeah, I mean, you got a week to do it. You're kind of trying everything you can. I would say, your weighing is Donovan Jackson at left tackle playing out of his comfort zone better with Luke Montgomery in there at guard, or would you rather have Donovan Jackson there at guard and then bring in a tackle, maybe the Armstrongs, who knows who the tackle would be, maybe even moving Luke Montgomery to right guard and double T out to tackle because he has some experience out there. So it's kind of a toss up. I'd have to. It's hard when you don't know who's who playing well and who's in that locker room. But it's not an easy task. But this is why you pay coaches in college big bucks, is because they got to be able to do stuff like that.
So let's stay on that just a little bit here, because for some fans, some people who've been around football for a long time, moving a guy out to tackle isn't like you do in Madden, where you just take a guy and maybe he's ranked 88 at guard, and then you move him to tackle, and now he's ranked 79, but he still gets the job done. Talk through it from your perspective. The difference between a left tackle's responsibilities and a right guard's responsibilities. For say, all right, we're calling inside zone to the right. If you're a guard, you have some set of responsibilities, but if you're now at left tackle, you have a totally different set of responsibilities on a play that's been hammered into your brain for 4 months now from the start of camp, and now you got to switch all that in just 3 days.
Yeah, it's a weird. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, the best way to describe it is when you're a tackle, you're on an island, and when you're a guard, you're the ultimate team guy, because you always have help, no matter. The only time you don't have help is if there's a three tech outside of you on a pass rush play, and you're on the man side. That's the only way you don't have help. Other than that, you're double teaming on almost every run play. Well, actually, anytime you have a 3 technique outside of you and you're on the play side is when you don't have help. But the rest of it, you're always double teaming. You're always helping other people. Whereas at tackle, you're on an island. Your pass setting a 5 technique, who's a 7, even a wide 7 rushing wide on you. You don't have the help. You don't have the ability to overset him because the center is following you. If that guard isn't quick enough to get out there, and if you move Donovan Jackson to tackle, that guard probably won't be ready to get out there like that. And that's where the biggest difference is for me. And the other thing is just the stance, because when you're a guard, you got to be down in 3-point. You got to fire out low and take on a 310-pounder. But when you're a tackle, you got to be unit 3-point or 2-point. But you're also dealing with all these shifty little athletic slippery worms that are defensive ends.
Yeah, and in some cases they're the best athletes on the field, right? You think of a lot of them. We're going to face one this weekend, and Abdul Carter. We'll get into him in a little bit, but defensive ends are a lot of times the scariest looking dudes on the field. You think Myles Garrett, right? 6'6", 6'7", probably, just like rocked up and can get after the quarterback, fast, strong, quick, all the things. And it makes it really, really challenging. And it's like, even from just, and maybe like there's an element to like, you start the game, the first 10, the first script, whatever it is. All right, here's my responsibility on each of them. This is how it's going to flip. But when pressure heats up and the game gets close and you're in the third quarter, the fourth quarter on a gotta-have-it drive, and you hear whatever, 61 protection, and you're tired and your mind goes to what your responsibility is as a guard, and instead, you're supposed to be doing what you're now doing as a tackle, and you got Abdul Carter in front of you doing MA, and that changes the game. So it's a really scary proposition, and one that's really interesting because we've talked about it a bunch. I think this show, us with having you on it, Kevin, for sure, gives the best perspective from an offensive line's point of view. And the offensive line is the most important group on the field, and nothing goes without the offensive line. And we've tried to paint the picture of how all 5 guys have to be on the exact same page up front. Like, no matter what, if one guy's wrong, all 5 of them have to be wrong, because at least you do it all together. But if everyone's right, you're in good shape, and you set your team up for success. So it's like, this is so critical. It cannot be understated that, whatever they decide to do on Saturday, has to be right, and it has to work, because the defensive line is a place that can wreck a game, and maybe it's not consistently play after play, but it just takes 1 or 2 big plays. We saw it last night. TJ Watt ended the game for the Steelers, right? It just takes 1 play or 1 or 2 plays like that to send you home with a loss.
I mean, yeah, you got to make sure that they're just game wreckers. It's only the crazy. You got to plan for it. You got to hope that you're playing well enough that when they do, because it's inevitable, they're going to wreck the game at one point or another. You just got to hope you're playing well enough on those other plays that it doesn't.
Attention to detail, man. It's going to be the biggest thing for them. So who are the Penn State Nittany Lions? We've talked about them a bunch. You've seen them kind of in highlights, and we hinted at it a little bit. These are not world beaters, right? This is a group that, yes, they are ranked number 3 in the country. Yes, they're playing very good football. Yes, they're undefeated, but some of their scores will have you kind of scratching your head. They beat West Virginia in week 1, 34-12, got after them really good in that first game. And then they had an absolute scare against Bowling Green, where they ended up pulling away and winning 34-27. But if you remember that game, Bowling Green was the better team for about 3.5 quarters, and Penn State was able to pull away with the win. Then they just bullied Kent, beat them 56-0. And then Illinois, they welcomed Illinois to town, beat them 21-7. So a good defensive performance, but Illinois has never been the best offense in the world. Then they go with a home game against UCLA, take care of business 27-11. Then they go out to USC. And one of the games of the year in terms of like finishes, it was just totally bonkers. And we'll get into their offense on our Thursday show, but their tight end just absolutely popped off in that game, and they needed every bit of it as they take down the Trojans 33-30. Now that game it can go, it can, I don't think it tells the most accurate story, saying that it was like a really close game. It's really hard to go out west to go get a win like that, especially in that environment. USC is not very good this year, so you got to take that into account. But a close win there. And then last week in a tough game, they beat Wisconsin 28-13. And, Kev, this is like a group that none of those wins seem convincing. Like, there's no, outside of beating Kent 56-0, like, you didn't shut anybody out. You haven't really dominated any team, especially some of the teams you're supposed to beat. BG should have beat them, so it's like they are certainly vulnerable, and they can get got.
Yeah, I would say that they're a little bit of a heart attack on wheels. I mean, they just give you a lot of anxiety. At least my friends that are Penn State fans say. It's never a sure thing until like 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. Even then, not even. But it's just it's a weird way that they've kind of played this year, where they've been the better team. They just haven't performed like the better team.
Mm-hmm. And it's like it's a group that you think back to that USC game, and it's like, yeah, they should roll that team, but they're in a dogfight. And then you think that they should roll you should roll West Virginia. You win by a couple scores. 22-point win is nice, but like that's a game you should dominate. UCLA, that shouldn't be a 2-possession game. You should dominate that game. UCLA had to fly all the way from LA to Eastern Pennsylvania for that game, and it's just like there's just some interesting stuff in there. But on defense, this team, outside of the BG game, they've only given up more than 15 points one time, and that was against USC, where they gave up 30. So they've held some teams. They've held their own, and it really starts on the back end. They're built similarly to Ohio State's team, where they have great safety play. And it starts with safety number 1, Jalen Reed. You'll see him flying around. He's a senior on this group. He's one of the leaders on this team. And his play backs that up. He's got 44 tackles on the year, 24 solos. He's got 1 forced fumble, 2 picks, 2 passes defense. So his nose is always around the ball. And not only does he play in the post and play the pass game well, he's also got 1.5 sacks. So he's a guy that, think Caleb Downs, where he can play down low. He can stick his nose in the run game. They're going to blitz him, right? He's going to get in the backfield to try to wreak havoc. And then he's also going to be able to cover up on the back end. So he's pretty good player on the back end. His partner, his running mate back there is Zakee Wheatley. He's going to wear number 6. He's a junior, so another veteran guy in the back. That's a big thing. 2 veteran cats in the back of their defense. He's got 37 tackles on the year, 1 interception, and 2 passes defense. So, Kev, from your perspective, like when you have 2 good safeties like they're going to have, how does that adjust things on the offense? Because those safeties, man, they can be problems in the pass game, and they can be problems in the run game, and they can be problems in protection as well.
Yeah, you got to make them one-dimensional. I mean, if they're going to be a Swiss Army knife, you got to take a few pieces out. And there's a few different ways to do that. You make them honor the run game. So they can't just drop back and pass. You gotta hit them with some big runs, and then on the flip side is you can't just hammer the ball down the entire time, and you gotta be able to have them bite with play actions that are able to keep them, maybe even trick them a little bit, and so you can get some deep shots down the field. So then they're like, okay, maybe we won't come up too hard on the run game anymore.
And I'd also add too, you got to be really crisp in your protection. You got to be, again, we said attention to detail earlier, running backs and quarterbacks and tight ends have to be really crisp in add-ons. You have to be really good at identifying pressure and making sure that you communicate it all out and do so in a way that, is effective. Because again, that's another type of a guy who you get a free rush off the edge, free blitz off the edge with nobody accounting for him. A guy like that can wreck a game. All right, moving up a level, their leading linebacker, Kobe King. He's going to be wearing number 41, sits in the middle of the defense, 6'1", 251, and he's kind of their quarterback on the field. He's got 34 tackles on the year. He's got 1 sack. He hasn't caused a turnover yet. No forced fumbles, no fumbles recovered, no interceptions, but he's the guy in the middle to keep an eye out for, and the one who's going to be lining up the guys up front. All right. And this is the spot for me that the game's going to change, right? This game hinges on Ohio State's line play. We touched on it a little bit with talking about how we would mix up the Ohio State offensive line, but it's going to be really important. They got some absolute animals to deal with here. Inside, playing defensive tackle, you'll notice him. He's going to be wearing number 28, Zane Durant, 6'1", 290. So this dude's like an anchor in the middle there. Going to be really tough to move, especially if you do move Donovan Jackson out to tackle and you bring in a backup guard. This is the area that Durant's going to be operating in. And he's a guy, only 11 solo tackles on the year, only 18 tackles in total, but 2.5 of those, Kevin, are sacks. And he's a guy who can stop the run and get after the quarterback from that interior.
Yeah, 11 solo tackles is kind of tough, especially when you're a defensive lineman, because you got to look at how many times linebackers go in there and snag a half a tackle. But I think he's going to be kind of the one they key on. They're obviously going to the Penn State's going to be keying on that defensive, on that whoever's playing left tackle, which makes sense because you want to exploit the weakness. But you can kind of guard that or hide that with some very good chips from the tight end or the running back if you're in the pass game, or double teams if you're in the run game. But that guard play is going to be important because you're not always going to be able to get that. You're not always going to get the 2-on-1 matchup on Durant.
Yeah, and especially too when he's flanked by one of the best players in the country, Abdul Carter, and this is a guy who he's going to be wearing number 11, and for Penn State, wearing number 11 is like Cody Simon wearing the block O. Number 11 is their best player on defense. Micah Parsons wore number 11 a few years back. Abdul Carter's got the sticks on for Penn State this year, and he is like a matchup nightmare. 6'3", 260 pounds, 17 solo tackles, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 30 tackles overall. 3 passes defense, which I think is an interesting stat for him, because not only does he rush the quarterback with reckless abandon, but when he does know he's gotten beat, he'll get his arms up and knock balls down. He's a guy that at least from my perspective, I never played tackle at your level. I never played tackle at all, but he would be a guy that would make me lose sleep at night.
Yeah, you never want to tell a guy that you're afraid of him, but let's just call a spade a spade. He's going to be on the top of their mind. I think that he is going to make plays, and you just got to let it happen. Like when you were playing the Warriors in the late 2010s, it's you let one of them beat you, don't let 3 of them beat you. Take out 2 of them and give Steph Curry 30 points. That's fine, but the rest of them are going to be held to 10, so it offsets. Whereas I think that's kind of what you got to do with him is, hey, he's going to wreck a few plays. He's going to make some plays in the backfield. He might get to Will Howard. He might do this. He might do that. I just think you kind of got to roll with it and be like, all right, we knew this was coming. Now we just go. You know what? Let's isolate the other 10 guys and let this one guy try and beat us. We'll run away from him. We'll do all we have to. But that's kind of what they're going to do.
Dude, and I think it's really important what you said too. Like, don't be afraid of him. For Will Howard, know he's there, know where he's at. Don't be stupid and not just totally ignore it. Understand he's over there on the right or over there on the left. Know where 11's at, but don't adjust anything you're doing because of it, right? Take your drop backs, step up in the pocket. You got to have ultimate trust in your guys, and everyone's got to step up a little bit, to do this. He's certainly not unblockable, but he is one of the best. He's the best player on this Penn State defense and one of the best players kind of around the country here. So, Kevin, back to putting the coaching hat on. One of the biggest question marks of this week was Ohio State's inability to run the football. They really struggled last Saturday, running the ball, even with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield. And we saw it. It kind of reared its ugly head. When they can't run the football, makes it really tough for them to pass it. So I don't know if it's a scheme thing that they got to adjust. I don't know if Chip Kelly's got to get a little bit more creative in their play calls, use motion, use whatnot. But how do they establish the run against a team that's pretty stout in the interior and on the second and third levels of their defense?
Yeah, I mean, they're top 10, number 8 rushing defense in the country. They're only letting up about 93 yards per game. You got to get a little creative, or you just got to start running some gap schemes. You're depleted on the offensive line, start running some double teams, get them off the ball, and maybe get a pulling guard in there or two. I think the key is to not have too many one-on-one blocks unless they're on the right side. If you're going to keep double T and Josh Fryer on the right side, then use them and have them be the one-on-one blocks. But it's going to be hard to try to convince Penn State that your game plan is going to be, hey, we're going to take this guard that's playing tackle or whoever. Yeah. He's going to be our man on Carter. He's going to block him one-on-one.
What would you, from a scheme perspective, like what would your thoughts be? And I'm sure they're in the lab right now, but getting a little bit more quarterback run specific stuff to gain a blocker in the backfield, or we talked about it early on in the year. Like, we haven't seen it much where both Quinshon and Travion are in the backfield. I don't know if that even gives you much of an advantage, because you're not putting one in there to block. But it at least could give the element of, hey, there's something tricky going on. And try to steal a couple free yards.
Yeah, you could try doing some quarterback runs, but I could also foresee them doing something similar, because Will Howard has been known to run the ball and burn teams with his legs. I can see them doing something similar to the mesh charge we ran against them and Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley, where it was you tell defensive end, hey, you have the running back, you go tackle him, and then you'll have a linebacker over the top that's going to take on McSorley one-on-one because it's a lot easier for a defensive lineman to just run full speed at a running back and tackle him than it is for them to try and tackle somebody in the open field or have a linebacker try and make a tackle on a running back after he's already gotten to the line of scrimmage. Yeah. So I could see them doing something similar to that. But you need the personnel to do it. I think that the real thing that you touched on right there was the two running backs. I think that can be helpful. You running and passing the ball, like bringing in two running backs, like, all right, here comes a run, and then flaring them both out.
Yeah.
And having them do flares and then having two slants in the middle, those linebackers are going to separate, and then, that's where it is. And if that's not open, you take G. Scott, run him at the seam, and throw him between the two safeties.
Ticker, get a ding for him. But literally, dude, before you even said that, I was even just gonna say, and not even in a joking way, this is a big tight end game. It just is gonna be that, because you're gonna have to. They're not gonna be secretive about having to help the tackle. And one way to do that, hey, throw a tight end out there. And it can be G. Scott chipping on Abdul Carter or whomever's rushing out there, chip on him and then get into a route, or stick on him, right? Go straight 2-on-1 and then be the check down. Like they're going to get creative with some stuff like that. And I think this is a big opportunity for the tight ends as well as the running backs. Like, and it's a big game, dude, honestly, big game for Chip Kelly in this offense. Like you're going to have to get creative, because you can't go into this game and say, hey, we're going to drop back 60 times because we couldn't run the ball. Because if you drop back that many times, it's going to be a long day. So them being balanced is going to be very, very important, and finding a way to do so. And that's a good way to good segue into the keys of the game. Keys for this Buckeyes offense in this game. There's a lot of different things that could wreck the football game. Kevin, what are a couple on the top of your mind that, hey, Ohio State has to do this to get a victory?
You got to make those linebackers play in space. You have the advantage. When it comes to slots and tight ends and running backs. Make them cover, make them play in space. They're number 8 rush defense, and they're number 18 pass defense. Like, they're evidently much better against the run than the pass. Force them to get the ball out in space, or force them to make plays. Like, if you're going to bring the tight end in a double team, run an RPO where it's just the tight end instead of double team and just runs a straight flat route, and send your other two receivers deep to clear out those two corners and or safety, and then force that linebacker to make a decision. Either stay in the box and you hit G. Scott and he's got 6 yards, or you go chase him, and then you got a cutback lane for Judkins or Henderson to come back the other way.
I think we may have ourselves a job here if it doesn't go well on Saturday, because we're dialing it up here on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast. Stuff like this you don't get anywhere else. So key for me, is figuring out a way, man. You got to be able to run the football. You cannot put the weight of this game on Will Howard's shoulders dropping back, because they will feast in a situation like that with the way that Ohio State offensive line is going to be. So for me, it's figure out a way to run the football. However you have to do it, you have to be pretty balanced on Saturday afternoon. So that is going to be a huge matchup for Ohio State, figuring out how to block up front and really protect the quarterback and find different ways to run the football here. So it's going to be exciting, and obviously the eyes of the nation will be on it. So Kevin, before we get out of here, any final thoughts? I guess you're this way on my screen. Any final thoughts before we take off here?
No, I think that the only thing I'd say is be patient with the line play, because it's been changed in and out so many times this season. It's hard to be cohesive, and it's hard to gel when you just keep moving everything around. So I think that'll be kind of a key to be patient. It might not look great in the first quarter, but don't be calling for anybody's job until maybe at the end of the game.
Yeah, until Kevin gives you the go ahead, and then you hold on for dear life. So everybody, appreciate you jumping in and hanging out with us tonight for another preview episode of the Buckeye Breakdown podcast. We're going to be back with you on Thursday, where we flip the script. We look at Ohio State's defense versus the Penn State offense, which, we don't know who's going to be playing quarterback. That's going to be a big question mark that everyone's going to have their eyes on, whether Drew Allard, the Cleveland kid, will be healthy enough to go. And even if Penn State is at their best with Drew Allard behind center, we'll figure that out as the week progresses. But subscribe to the channel. We love doing this type of content for you. So get alerted anytime that Kevin and I bring you something, whether we go live or whether we drop some recorded content for you. We appreciate you jumping in. For all of our written content, head over to our site, si.com/college/Ohio State, where we have you covered all things Ohio State as they get set for a huge matchup out in Happy Valley this weekend. Noon kickoff between the number 3 Penn State Nittany Lions and the number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes. Thanks for hanging out with us. And until next time, go Bucks.